So why don't we get started, everyone? So my name is Megan Arndt. I'm the Associate Director of Communications here at ASH, and we're very grateful that all of you have decided to join us today for our Giving Tuesday 2020 Town Hall. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Since this is meeting style where we can see everyone's faces, we ask that you also keep your microphones on mute the whole time, just so that there's no feedback or anything going on. If you do want to ask a question, we'll answer all of those at the end, and you can use the chat box to do so. If you'd like to ask your question live, if you see across the bottom where it says participants, if you click on that, it'll show you who's on the call. And across the bottom, there's a button that says raise hand. So I just did it and raised my hand, and you can see it in that participants window. So if that's how you would like to ask your question, you can use that feature. And then you also see a lot of the ASH staff have these virtual backgrounds going. Peter, one of our allies, did that as well. If you're interested in using one of the virtual backgrounds, I just put the link in the chat box, and you can download any of those where it says stop video or start video. If you don't have it on, there's an arrow up, and you can click on that. And then they show you options for virtual backgrounds, and the plus sign is where you would add your own virtual background. So we invite you all to join us with the virtual backgrounds. They're kind of fun to use. So now getting into the bulk of our program, ASH is the oldest anti-tobacco nonprofit in the US. You'll hear from our executive director, Laurent Hubert, next on how we got started in the late 80s. Our mission is to advocate for innovative legal and policy measures to end the global tobacco epidemic. We have programs focused on global norms, human rights, phasing out the sale of combustible tobacco, and different legal avenues. And because today is Giving Tuesday, we did also want to mention that we have a matching grant. I have how you would donate right here, a matching grant underway. So if you do donate today, your donation will be matched dollar for dollar up to $35,000, which is a pretty exciting opportunity for us. And I will put that link in the chat box as well, or as I said, there's a number to text to donate if that's a lot easier for you. But no pressure if you don't have the capacity to give. We appreciate your partnership on content and ongoing work together. So now it's time to light your meditation candle. If you got one of the goodie bags, you got this little candle in the mail. So I'll invite you all to light your candle, and we will then switch over to the meditation section from the meditation and wellness expert, Tara Huber. And she's just gonna try and help put your mind at ease with a short 2 minutes meditation before we return to the rest of the program. But thank you for joining us, Tara.
Hello, everyone. I invite you to get into a comfortable seated position with a nice long spine. Just take a moment to adjust and feel comfortable in your chair. And when you're ready, I want you to close your eyes and bring your attention to your breath, focusing on the inhalations and the exhalations through the nose. And while you're taking this quiet, thoughtful moment, bring to mind the concept of gratitude and thankfulness. Taking a moment to think about what that means to you. And then think about a thing or two that might make you feel gratitude or thankfulness. And allow yourself to fill with a deep sense of whatever emotional sense that concept brings to mind. Allowing it to fill your heart, your mind, and your body. Just holding on to the idea that a life filled with gratitude and thankfulness brings joy and comfort. And as you move away from the meditation and come back to the event, carry with you that feeling of gratitude and bring it with you into the holiday season. I'm very grateful for your time with us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tara. I hope that sort of calmed any anxiety people have going following the long weekend for those of us in the US, and just gave you a little more centered mindset as we enter into the rest of the program. So next, I will turn it over to our Executive Director, Laurent Hubert, who will tell us a little bit about ASH's history.
Hello, and welcome everyone to this event today. So I'll just give you, for those of you who are not that familiar with ASH, just a very brief overview of the organization. And as Megan mentioned, it's one of the oldest tobacco control organizations in the US. It was formed in 1967 as a response to the Luther Terry Surgeon General report that had been released in 64 that made it very clear that tobacco use was a cause of death and disease. One of its first major victories was, some of you may have heard of it, is the Fairness Doctrine, which basically forced radio and television stations to give free airtime to health organizations in proportion to tobacco advertising that the TV and radio channels ran. So the tobacco industry really hated this counter-marketing so much that it basically led to the Federal Cigarette Labeling and Advertising Act, which permanently ended up banning tobacco radio and television ads. So that was the first success. Then in the 70s, it was very involved in the smoke-free air movement. Basically, one of its main functions was to protect non-smokers' rights. And for nearly 30 years, this was our primary campaign. That was the major thing we did, was really protecting non-smokers' rights. And work we've continued to do, obviously, but we've moved on since then. But for example, we're involved in the banning and smoking in airplanes, for example. But in 2000, the board of directors of ASH, given the transnational nature, the global nature of the tobacco epidemic, or we could say pandemic, the board of directors of ASH decided to really engage at the global level. They felt that we needed to get involved in the development of global solutions to advance local tobacco control. And that's when I joined ASH in 2000, just a little over 20 years ago, and to lead the international efforts. And what we did is we became very, very strongly involved in the negotiations of the very first public health treaty that was just about to be negotiated under the auspices of the World Health Organization. That was the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, FCTC for short. And it's the first and still only really truly global public health treaty. And ASH was instrumental in supporting that process. And we were really working hard to support the development of a strong public health evidence-based treaty, and then support its implementation and entry into force at the country level. And we did this work mostly by supporting and serving as the secretariat and directorship of what was at the time the Framework Convention Alliance, the global alliance of more than 500 NGOs from more than 100 countries that served as the advocacy arm for the public health community for the treaty negotiations, a role we took on until at the end of 2015 when we handed it off to allies in Canada. But this was really a critical function that we took on. And I remember before the treaty negotiations started, we felt that civil society, we were a little scared. I remember a meeting we had just before the second round of negotiations in early 2001. And we thought the tobacco industry is going to destroy us, this process. And that ended up not being the case. And I remember one of the attendants at the meeting, one of our colleagues, raised his hands because we were all a little bit depressed. And he said, well, no, actually, we have the expertise. We can really influence this process. And that's really what ended up happening. And as a result of the work, the FCA and all of our colleagues around the world working with ASH, we ended up with a strong evidence-based treaty that has been one of the most rapidly embraced treaties in the UN system, with now 182 parties, 181 countries and the European Union. And while we do not serve the Secretariat, we still to continue to be being very engaged in this treaty process. But in addition to working with the FCTC, ASH has also been involved in some other important global victories. We collaborated in the inclusion of making sure that tobacco was included as a central theme at the UN Political Declaration on Non-Communicable Diseases, adopted in 2011 by the United Nations General Assembly. That was the only second high-level meeting on a health issue, and tobacco made it front and center, as well as then a global action plan that was adopted a little bit later by the World Health Assembly and calls for a 30% reduction in tobacco use. Then in 2015, we also were involved in the inclusion of tobacco and the FCTC in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In 2016, we worked to support the exemption of a tobacco in the Trans-Pacific Partnerships to protect anti-tobacco policies from litigation by the tobacco industry, something that then has been also then included in other bilateral agreements and trade agreements between countries. And I think it's safe to say that a lot of those victories would not have happened without our engagement and those of our partners also. And in many of those cases, even when we started planning some of those campaigns, we were told by colleagues that those were impossible, they were unfeasible, and we were crazy to go for such ambitious goals. And some of those goals now would not seem ambitious at all. I remember in the second round of the FCTC negotiations, treaty negotiations, going into a meeting with the Irish government, with the European governments, actually was a number of European governments and the Irish were present. And we pushed for the concept of smoke-free policies. And the Irish delegate said, from the government representation, said, no, we cannot go that far. We have to protect the rights of workers, and workers have the right to smoke. And even the public health community, even NGOs, thought it was too radical. We could not even get a smoke-free policy within the FCA because it was considered too radical to demand that bars and restaurants, for example, would be smoke-free. And so we actually, in that last round of negotiations, the ASH went alone with a few partners, like the American Lung Association and a few others, and we were able to introduce it in the treaty. And it's become now one of the most rapidly embraced articles in the treaty, and become now really common, the norm in tobacco control to support tobacco smoke-free policies. So something that can, so pushing the agenda, something that can be really radical at one point, doesn't have to be, after time passes, is no longer radical. But we have not only addressed tobacco through international law and the FCTC, integrating tobacco at the UN level and global UN development and trade, but over the past decade also, we've been increasingly talking about tobacco through and viewing the tobacco epidemic through a human rights lens. And a key turning point was really for us was in 2017, and it's worth the story. We were alerted by one of our colleagues in Europe that the Danish Institute for Human Rights, which is basically a quasi-governmental institution mandated by the Danish Parliament, had entered into contract with Philip Morris International. Basically what he was doing into a contractual relationship to basically run a human rights audit of Philip Morris and along the supply chain of their products. And because this institution is quasi-governmental, we got in touch with them and informed them that this was actually illegal under the treaty, and treaty was a party to the FCTC, and basically that was illegal. And not only did they rescinded the partnership, but to their credit, they went even further, and they made a very strong assessment on PMI's human rights standing. And they basically concluded, and I'm quoting, opening quotes here, there can be no doubt that the production and marketing of tobacco is irreconcilable with the human right to health. For the tobacco industry, the UN guiding principles therefore require the cessation of the production and marketing of tobacco, end of quote. This was a turning point because for the first time, a human rights institution basically came to the conclusion that the marketing and selling of a deadly and addictive product amounted to a human right violation. And at this point, ASH also reassets its status as a tobacco control organization, given that control implies that there's a level of death that we can live with and tolerate as a price to pay to continue supporting the commercial and financial interests of an industry, like the tobacco industry. So something we're really thinking about at ASH. And in our position, in our view, the commercial marketing and commercial sale of, just like the Danish Institute for Human Rights concluded, is irreconcilable with the human right to health. And our vision, it's very similar to that of countries that have set up very ambitious targets to decreasing smoking prevalence, and countries that want to see a world free from the harm caused by tobacco. And a number of countries have done that. Ireland, for example, by 2025. Finland, wants to get to below 5% by 2030, and Scotland below 5% prevalence or less by 2034. So a number of countries are thinking about a future like this. And ASH is 100% focused still in the global tobacco pandemic, and really wielding the human rights and human rights law and norms as our weapon. And through this work, we're going to continue engaging in human rights bodies, like the Human Rights Council and other UN fora and processes, and use reporting mechanisms to elevate the profile at the FCTC as a tool to achieve national health as well as human rights objectives, and also to denounce industry interference from the tobacco industry in policymaking at country level. But also the public health lens, the human rights lens, is the genesis for two of our newer programs, which I'm very excited to introduce, and you'll hear more about them today. But when analyzes tobacco through human lens, we can come to the conclusion that governments really have a duty to protect their citizens from the harms caused by tobacco. And they need to do that by addressing the supply side, something that was not fully done in the FCTC, in the tobacco treaty, with the exception of illicit trade of tobacco products. So in addition to the FCTC, we think that countries also must address the supply side and put in place plans to phase out the commercial sales of tobacco products. So ASH has launched a Project Sunset with the goal of phasing out the commercial sale of tobacco products, and you'll hear more about that. And we also think that the industry must be held into account for their abuses. And we are very keen to using novel legal actions, including the Criminal Liability Program, aimed at holding the tobacco industry and its executives for the harm they cause. So you hear about more about that also in a minute. As for our future, our aim is to put ourselves out of business as soon as possible. And we really believe that the global tobacco epidemic or pandemic that kills more than 8 million people per year is a human rights and human development challenge that society and the world should be able to solve and issue within our lifetime. So really, thank you again for joining us today, and I hope that you find this little history of ASH useful, and pass it over to Megan again.
Thank you, Laurent. So next we will turn into our 2020 team highlights. So you'll get an update from the rest of the ASH staff on things that they found exciting and really productive this past year. It's been a challenging year with the COVID-19 pandemic hitting us early on, but ASH was able to bounce back quite quickly. And so you'll hear just how we did that. So first, I will turn it over to Liz Ferguson, our Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you to everyone again for joining us today. I want to take a moment to thank our ASH staff team for so easily and seamlessly adapting to a changed working environment, and every day going above and beyond to ensure that work continues towards all of our goals for each of our programs and initiatives. On a personal level, I'm so proud of all of ASH's collaborative initiatives with our public health and tobacco control colleagues. As so much of ASH's work is focused on a global and national level, I'm particularly proud of our collaboration this year at the local level here in the District of Columbia with our DC Tobacco Free Coalition and each one of the coalition members. We've had the privilege of partnering with the coalition for several virtual events and webinars, all of which are recorded and available on our website at ash.org. As we look forward into 2021 and beyond, we're excited to continue work with the coalition to bring global to local concepts to support programming here in the district as we work towards addressing the disparities and inequities that remain in public health today, particularly with flavored tobacco products and especially menthol. To our donors and supporters at this event, thank you all for your support and for standing with us this year. Our organization and our impact simply would not be possible without you. And as you already know, contributions to ASH through December 15th are being very generously matched up to $35,000. Thank you again to all of you for joining, and I'm excited to hear from the rest of our staff team. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you, Liz. Next up, let's hear from Nichelle Gray. She's our program coordinator, and you likely recognize her name if you're on our webinar series, because she is very involved in our webinar series. So Nichelle, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Megan. And I'll repeat Liz and Megan and everyone else and say thank you for joining us today. I am excited to report on a highlight that I worked on this year, which is ASH's contribution to the annual Global Tobacco Industry Interference Index. That is a report that's produced by GGTC and Stop Partners, which is a global tobacco industry watchdog. So this is actually the second year that ASH has contributed to the global report. And for those who are unfamiliar, the Global Index is a report that shows how well governments are protecting public health policies from industry interference. And it gives each contributing country a score based on a set of indicators. So this is also the second year that ASH is producing its own national report. Our report is the US Tobacco Industry Interference Index 2020. And our report will spotlight organized efforts by the tobacco industry to mess with public health policy and regulations, but it specifically focuses on the US. And so it's one of only a few, if any, reports that really focuses on tobacco industry interference in this country and uses a standardized index to quantify tobacco industry interference. So next week is going to be pretty busy for us. We have our launch date Tuesday, December 8th. And then we'll also follow that up with a webinar that we're hosting on Thursday, December 10th at 12 p.m. Eastern. I will be joined that day with a partner of ours, Doug Matheny, and he is from TSET Health Promotion Research Center, and it's an organization in Oklahoma. And he has helped us with this report as well as our previous report last year. So our webinar will focus on providing an overview of the global context for this report. And it will touch on the WHO FCTC and the Article 5.3 guidelines. We'll also go over the US score this year and compare that to last year's score as well as other countries. And then we'll walk you through the indicators that we lay out in the report, which include levels of participation in policy development, as well as transparency in government interactions with the tobacco industry and conflicts of interest. We also hope to have a couple of state examples, which are also highlighted in our report. And then finally, we'll provide some key recommendations for advocates to use. So I really hope you all can join us next week. Again, that is Thursday, December 10th at 12 p.m. Eastern. I'll be sending an email out to everyone with the registration link. So I hope to see you all then. And thank you so much. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you, Nichelle. I'm excited for that webinar next week as well. Next, let's turn it over to Chris Bostic. He's the Deputy Director for Policy at ASH.
Okay, thanks, Megan, and thanks everyone. It's great to see some old friends and some new friends, and hopefully soon we'll be back to the point where I can see you all in person. 2020 has been a weird year, but it was actually a pretty successful one for Project Sunset. And if you're not familiar, Project Sunset is ASH's campaign to phase out the sale of tobacco products. Globally, we're after combustible tobacco products, but in the United States, because of the youth vaping epidemic, we've expanded that to all tobacco products. And I think that a lot of things happened this year, but I'm going to focus on just one thing. 2020 was the last year where Project Sunset is a concept. As of a month from today, January 1st, 2021, we will have 2 cities that have banned the sale of all tobacco products. So there'll be no tobacco products on the shelves in 1 month from now in Beverly Hills and Manhattan Beach in California. So several other cities in California and other places in the country and around the world are considering this. Some of those efforts have been slowed down because of COVID, because the same people that work on COVID work on all public health, and they were not able to really focus on anything else. But I'm confident we're going to see more in 2021 and beyond. Just in the past week, we had an interesting development, a very positive step in Massachusetts. The Town Council of Brookline amended their age of purchase restrictions. Brookline was one of the first places in the world to go to 21 as a minimum age of purchase, and it spread from there. They changed that now, and it's not based on age, but on birth date. So as of January 1st of this year, anyone born on or after January 1st of the year 2000 will never be able to buy tobacco products. So basically, it's a sales ban with a grandfather clause for adults that are already smoking and addicted. Hopefully, of course, we're going to be putting in some efforts to help those people quit. We don't want to abandon current smokers, but this is a fantastic step in the right direction. This concept is called the tobacco-free generation concept. It's been floating around for almost a decade. That it has nearly been passed in many places and was passed in 1 city in the Philippines. Of course, they were sued by the tobacco industry, and they're still embroiled in that. But we're hoping this will spread not just in the United States, but around the world. But beyond specific new laws, we've made a lot of progress in normalizing the idea of Project Sunset. When we set out about 5 years ago to begin talking to our colleagues about sales bans, we mainly got polite nods or a sure, you go and do that kind of dismissal. They weren't against it. They just thought it was a fantasy. And as Laurent said, that's kind of where ASH has lived over the past half a century. But it's not a fantasy anymore. Today, ASH chairs a national advisory committee, and we co-chair a global advisory committee that's dedicated to seeing the success of Project Sunset. And it's made up of prominent public health experts from all over the world. And we're working to establish similar movements in other nations. So that's something else we can look forward to in 2021. You'll probably see a number of national movements to end the sale of tobacco products. One of the members of our U.S. steering committee is named April Ruselier. And she runs the California Department of Public Health's anti-tobacco arm, and she was with us from day one. The state of California has set an exciting goal, and this is separate from Project Sunset. They didn't copy us, they moved just down the same path. They want to eliminate tobacco use in the state by 2035, and phasing out sales is the keystone of their plan. So ASH is working with them. We're serving on 2 state advisory committees, and we're very pleased to have brought on board a full-time project director, Carol Matum, who's going to talk more about our California initiative in just a moment. ASH has also been in conversations with advocates and government officials in other countries. There's growing excitement, and we feel like this movement is really going to take off in the next 2 to 3 years. Finally, I want to give a sneak peek to something coming up early next year. In coordination with our steering committees, ASH has drafted an open letter to governments urging them to put plans in place to phase out tobacco sales. Many countries have tobacco control plans, long-term plans, but very few actually foresee getting to 0 sales. So we're urging governments to start doing that. In the meantime, we've been busy behind the scenes seeking support from prominent organizations, and we've been very excited by the reaction so far. We're going to publish the full list along with the letters. But we have signatures not only from anti-tobacco groups, but from prominent schools of public health like Ohio State, Johns Hopkins, and Harvard. We have national and global medical associations, we have cancer institutes, we even have a few public health departments, even one national one. So that's going to grow. We expect to have hundreds of organizations from scores of countries by the time we release it, probably in late January. And if someone is on here from an organization that might be interested in signing, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to give you the letter and discuss what we're going to do with it. So I'll end here and hand it over to Carol Matum. I guess I'll go back to you first, Megan. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. And yes, we'll turn it over next to Carol Matum. Like Chris said, she's our latest addition at ASH. She is the project director of our new campaign, Advancing Momentum for a Tobacco-Free California. So Carol, over to you.
Sorry about that. Welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. It's been a wonderful time being integrated into the ASH team. As mentioned, I am working on the California project, which is what we've labeled the end game in California, the strategies and tactics that we'll be using to achieve that goal of being tobacco-free in California by 2035. In 2020, ASH became an integral part of the tobacco control efforts in California. Over the next 5 years, in collaboration with the California Tobacco Control Program, ASH will seek to facilitate 15 local jurisdictions while they move to ban the sale of all tobacco products. Known as the Tobacco Endgame, ASH will provide communications and outreach training, technical resources, and support to advocates and brand ambassadors. Through technical assistance trainings and direct support, ASH can assist with the development of media and message materials, development of communication tools, recruitment of training and brand ambassadors, and training and material developed on the tobacco epidemic related to the environment, human rights, and economics. We'll be working collaboratively with other endgame technical assist providers. And if anyone is interested in receiving support from ASH, don't hesitate to reach out to me through the ASH website or through the private chat here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. I will go next. The thing I'm really excited about this past year in 2020 has been the new webinar series that a ton of you have engaged with us on. We've been able to bring in over 65 experts from around the world and thousands of interested public health allies and partners who have engaged in this series and told us all the benefits of them and the ways it's been able to expand their programs. So that's been a really exciting development for us. And then what I'm looking forward to next year is similar to what Chris said, but I'm really excited to see the outcome of the ban on the sale of combustible tobacco in Beverly Hills and Manhattan Beach. We've been talking about this for a long time, and we'll now have the data to back up what we have been talking about. And so I'm really looking forward to that next year. So we will close the staff highlights portion with Kelsey Romeo Steppe, the managing attorney here at ASH. So over to you, Kelsey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey Romeo Steppe. It's nice to see a lot of familiar names and faces. I work on two ASH programs, our Liability Program and our Human Rights Program. I wanted to talk to you first about our Liability Program. Internally, we refer to it as TCLIP, which stands for Tobacco Criminal Liability Program. The name refers to one of the goals of the program, which is to hold tobacco executives and corporations criminally responsible for the murder of their customers. We continue work to encourage a prosecutor to bring criminal charges against the industry. TCLIP also includes a broader goal of using legal tools to end the tobacco epidemic. And the most exciting aspect of this program in 2020 falls into that category. ASH, along with our partners at the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council, AATCLC, and the American Medical Association, the AMA, are suing the FDA for their inaction on menthol cigarettes. We're encouraging the FDA to ban menthol flavors and protect American lives. This is particularly relevant this year as the Black Lives Matter movement has gained so much momentum. And 9 out of 10 Black people that smoke in the United States smoke menthols due to long-term targeted advertising by the tobacco industry. So this case is not just about health, but about racial inequities as well. This case just survived its first big hurdle when a judge declined the FDA's motion to dismiss the case. So the case will move forward, which means very exciting things will be happening on that case in 2021. Actually, very exciting things will be happening on that case later this week. Another high-profile plaintiff is expected to sign on, so watch for that announcement soon. This leads me to an update about our human rights program as well. This year, our liability program and our human rights program have been connected by menthol, among a lot of other things, but by menthol most immediately. There's an international human rights treaty called CERD. It stands for the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. And it's one of the very few human rights treaties that the United States has signed. At ASH, we're working with local partners in California and in DC to help teach local advocates how to use international tools like CERD and human rights arguments to further their advocacy. For me, it's been really gratifying to see human rights and liability come together and to see the intersection of human rights and tobacco control in practice. While COVID has stopped us from traveling around the world for our work in 2020, it's impacted all of our programs, but I think it had the biggest impact on our human rights program, as we usually spend time at the Human Rights Council in Geneva and meeting with other international institutions around the world. We also had plans to travel to partner countries like France, where we're working on human rights reports. While our work this year has been a bit different than we expected, COVID has certainly not slowed us down. We've been writing journal articles, hosting the webinars that Megan talked about, conducting meetings like this one over Zoom. We've been continuing to update our Tobacco and Human Rights Hub. We're preparing resources for the CERD work I mentioned. We have filed reports with human rights bodies. For example, we did a report with partners in Sweden for the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And we've made some fantastic progress in projects that are going to be very important next year. For example, our work with our partners in France around tobacco and human rights. I'm really proud of how we have pivoted and adjusted our work in this unprecedented year. While 2020 has been really different than we've planned, it's also been a busy and very productive year, and we're in a great place looking forward to next year. 2021 is going to be a really important year for ASH, I think. We'll likely see the conclusion of our FDA case and a lot of forward progress on our human rights work, especially our work around CERD. It should be really exciting, so I'm glad you'll be able to follow along with us. Thanks. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you, Kelsey. So I hope this section from our staff team has shown you why we've been really productive this year, and also how we are able to get the confidence of a few generous donors who have put together our matching grant. So just as a reminder, again, if you go to ash.org/donate, you can donate on the website, or using, if you text the word health to 707070, you can also donate from your phone that way. So before we get into your questions, we're going to put up a quick poll to see which of our programs you're most excited about in 2021. And also just a reminder during this time that you can submit your questions through the chat box. So we encourage you to do so. The chat box, you can send it either directly to me, my name again, Megan Arndt, or you can send it to everyone, and we'll be able to address questions like that. So we'll just give you all a few minutes before we pull that up. Nichelle, do we want to show the results, or are we just using that for us? I'm not sure if everyone has voted yet.
I believe it will show results as soon as the poll is ended.
Okay, awesome. And then also for those of you who purchased a goodie bag in advance, next up is our photo booth, and then we'll close with questions. So grab your photo booth props, and when the poll ends, we'll take a couple photos so that it feels like we were at a real event together, even though it's online, and then we'll switch into your questions to close it out.
I think most people have answered, so I am going to close this poll.
Awesome. So you guys are interested in a large variety of our programs, so that's fantastic. Glad to see all of that. If there's any programs in particular that you want to follow up with us on or chat with anyone on the call, we're always happy to do that. Just respond to the email that you'll get after this call with that. So now let's move into our quick photo booth and then we'll do the Q&A. If you're using a virtual background and you have the props, you actually have to turn it off so that you'll be able to see your props. So just as a heads up, and then everyone can smile and we'll take a couple photos. If you haven't turned yours on, maybe you want to turn your camera on now just for the photo booth. No pressure though. Awesome. I love the photo booth props or the making your own. That's fantastic. Just one more. Smile. Awesome. So now let's see what questions you have for us. So again, if you want to raise your hand, click on participants on the bottom, and then you'll be able to raise your hand. We did get one submission via email from Darlene, who I'm not sure if Darlene is on or maybe she's on the phone, but I see Darlene on. So I will read the question. How can we impact secondhand smoke in multi-unit dwellings? Everyone knows the dangers, but it seems an area that condo authority boards, property management do not deal with well. It's almost like they turn a blind eye to the approach, and people with health issues suffer from the stress of trying to stop neighbors from smoking. And so, Darlene, this is a question I get often. People call us about this all the time. We do have some resources that we can send to you about dealing with secondhand smoke from neighbors and from partners. A lot of our partners have put together that information. So I'll follow up with those resources via email and encourage anyone else who has that same question to just let us know, and we can follow up with you as well. But was there anyone else on the ASH side that wanted to respond to that? Go ahead, Chris.
Just a quick response. This has been an intractable problem, but there's some progress being made. In a number of states now, there's precedent for holding not just the neighbor accountable for harms caused by secondhand smoke, but the landlord. And you were saying that people don't take it seriously enough. They'll take it seriously if they're going to get sued about it. So we need to have that spread.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions? I don't see any hands raised, so we can end early if there aren't any other questions, but I just don't want to miss anyone. Okay, awesome.
There's one in the chat box.
Oh, did one come now? From Elizabeth, could you speak more about the ban of combustible products? What would that look like? Chris, do you want to take that?
Sure. So it's the most important thing is it's only about sales. So this is not about possession or use. It recognizes the fact that the perpetrator of the tobacco industry of the tobacco epidemic is the industry and not the smokers. For a long time, we seem to have, as a society, blamed smokers, and if we can only get those darn smokers to stop, we get rid of the epidemic. But we have taken into account that almost all of them become addicted as children. So that the freedom of choice has been entirely taken away. And most adult smokers wish they could quit. And we have a duty to help them quit. But the first thing we need to do, and this is what you do with any addictive product, is take the person who's addicted to it away from the product. And in this case, we're taking the products away. And we've had a number of emails and phone calls from individuals begging us to get Project Sunset done in their hometowns because they've tried 15 times to quit. But they can't because every time they go to the gas station or the corner store or the drugstore, they're confronted with a wall of cigarettes, and they just fall back into smoking. So the first thing to do is just to get them out of their face, and that's what we're going to try to accomplish.
Fantastic. So Chris, I also got a question to just me asking if we have any work on third-hand smoke. We do directly, but do you have anything that you could say on that?
Well, only that there's a growing body of evidence that suggests that third-hand smoke is a real health threat. And this is something a little bit recent. Even 20 years ago, when I first got involved in tobacco control, third-hand smoke really wasn't a thing. But they're finding now that the harmful elements can linger for days or weeks or even longer in carpets and curtains and things like that. So as the research comes out, of course, we need to start putting policies in place to track that research and have policies that implement mitigation efforts.
Fantastic. So I see also that Pamela said that they've had a lot of success in Northern California. Pamela, would you want to say anything, or do you want to email me some of your resources? Because I'd be happy to share those with people on the call as well. Yeah, go ahead, Pamela. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, Pam Granger. I'm in Northern California. I used to work for the American Lung Association, and now I said I would fight big tobacco for free, and I'm proving it in retirement. We're so fortunate in California that science and political will has overlapped. I actually see Thomas Novotny's face on the list. I know he's done a lot of research that we benefited from. But if you take a look at resources that we have from all of the Americans, so American Lung, Heart and Cancer, and ASH, you'll see that we've got a lot of documents of the science of air exchange, which is a big deal. So they say it doesn't, couldn't happen, but air exchange, third-hand smoke, we've got a lot of information on that. So California, it doesn't have a lock on the science, but we appear to have a lot of political will. So we're happy to share things that we have with our colleagues. No one should feel the harms of secondhand smoke and third-hand smoke at home, where they should feel the safest. And we know who's at home. Ordinarily, it would be kids and seniors who are particularly harmed by health kinds of things. Now everybody is, since we're home for COVID. So thank you for letting me give a shout out to California.
Yeah, no problem at all. And so I just put our email in the chat box as well, hq@ash.org. If you want to send us any of your resources, I'll pass them on to Darlene as well. And I know Kelsey wanted to respond to Dr. Novotny. So Kelsey, I'll turn it over to you.
Yep, I don't know. Can everyone see the chat box? But Tom Novotny asked, he said he would like ASH to partner with environmental advocacy groups. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that we are. We only had an hour to talk to you about all the fantastic work we do, and we had to leave a lot out. But I think it's really important to all of us to include environmental issues in our work. In the human rights side, we're making sure when we report to human rights bodies that we include in that the harms of tobacco on the environment. And I know Chris has discussed this and thought about it a lot in Project Sunset. It's obviously an advantage for banning sale of tobacco that there's less tobacco waste. So I just wanted to highlight that we absolutely do think about that, and we are open to partnering with environmental advocacy groups. We'd love to do more of that, I think.
Awesome, thank you, Kelsey. And I see that Mr. Draves has raised his hand. Did you want to ask your question?
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment about how people, the smokers, are more considerate of people. I was getting to the end of my 569 mile bicycle ride this summer. I was in Enterprise, West Virginia, and Mr. Feathers asked, "Do you want to ride?" And I said yes, and we loaded my bike into his pickup truck. And we were at our doors getting in, and he lit up his cigarette. And I kind of made the issue that, I was allergic to it or whatever. And he took a couple of puffs, and then he put it out. And then we rode about for 15 miles or so. So the message is getting out to the smokers. I'm very happy to relate. In West Virginia, they were having cigarette double packs and triple packs as a way to sell the cigarettes now. So I guess they were experiencing some downfall in their sales, and now they're going to the multi-packs and such. But a lot of advertising still out in those rural communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the common message that Ash shares too, that we're not fighting against the smokers or the individual users, we're fighting against the tobacco industry. And so that's why too, in Kelsey's comments about our legal work, we're not attacking the smokers, we're attacking the tobacco companies because they're the ones who are selling a product that's addicting and killing people. The smokers are victims, and yes, we don't want them to smoke around us and make us victims as well, but we need to treat them with the same compassion we do addicts of any other product, especially because this wasn't a choice. No one can consent to addiction. Many are getting hooked when under the age of 18, so they're not able to consent to a lifetime of addiction and likely early death. And so we're trying to come at it from that other side of it and attacking the sales side of it and the tobacco industry side of it rather than the individual user. So I definitely appreciate that comment.
Well,
Are there any?
thank you very much for those comments. I'm president of Georgians Against Smoking Pollution. And
Oh,
we
that's fantastic.
changed it from the general thing of smokers pollution back when we separated from the Lung Association. So
That makes sense.
we tried to make it a point. We're against the smoke or smoking, not the smokers.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other questions? I think I've gone through everything in the chat box, but I just want to confirm.
There's two more in there, Megan, I think.
Oh, mine might not be loading.
Well, I can go through them real quick if you'd like.
Okay,
Someone asked, do we know President-elect Joe Biden's stance on tobacco? We don't know a lot about it, but two sort of indicators push in two directions. We did find out that his campaign accepted a donation from a tobacco company. We've written to him to ask him to return that money. It's doubtful that he himself decided to collect it. It was his campaign, so hopefully he can turn it back in. On the other hand, 3 of the people that he has assigned to his COVID response team are very strong on tobacco control, and so we're going to have some interior voices in the administration right away. There's one more quick question here. Will there be an ASH Canada? Oh, go ahead, Laurent.
Just on Joe Biden's position, we have attended meetings in the past on cancer prevention where he's been present, and his position seemed to be very sympathetic to tobacco control based on the interactions we've had with him in the past. So we hope it could at least be should not be an adversarial relationship, we hope.
Absolutely. The next question was, will there ever be an ASH group in Canada? The answer is there actually is an ASH in Canada. It's a very good acronym and is used by about a dozen groups around the world. But ASH Canada is not legally affiliated with ASH US, although they are an ally, and we work collaboratively with ASHs all over the world. To my knowledge, the ASH in Canada has not adopted Project Sunset as a sort of raison d'etre, but they're certainly not opposed, and they've been helpful in spreading the word.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So I think we've gone through all the questions. Like I said, you'll get an email after the webinar ends today, so feel free to respond if you have any other questions or resources that you think that we should know about to also share with people. This is a communal effort. A lot of you are also working with us, and so we appreciate that, and just want to clarify that we do need you, so stay with us. You're all doing fantastic work. So let's keep up the work together. And just as a reminder again, since it is Giving Tuesday, we have a matching campaign going. So all donations up to $35,000 will be matched dollar for dollar, giving you the chance to have twice the impact. So we hope if you're able to, that you'll consider supporting us today. If not, we hope to continue working with you on all of our policy work. You can check out our social media on the slide right there and our website, ash.org. Otherwise, thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ash and everyone.
Bye, thanks.
Cheers.